Step into the illuminated dark room where I shine a light on breast-related topics and beyond. I'm Dr. E.P. McCurley, a general radiologist with over 20 years of experience in breast imaging. In this podcast, we'll explore the diverse and unique patient journeys, share insights, and empower listeners with knowledge. Join me as we dive into candid, real conversations that illuminate the path to better breast health. I get to hang with you. So hello. I'm here, yes, with the lovely Ellyn Winters Robinson. So before we get started, I'm going to read off an intro, which you said I should cut short. Absolutely not. I actually added something to it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so Ellyn Winters Robinson is a storyteller, an in-demand speaker, women's health advocate, professional communicator, and a globally recognized health rebel. She's the author of the best-selling book, Flat, Please Hold the Shame, a girlfriend's companion guide for those on the breast cancer journey. She's also the co-creator of AskEllyn.ai, the world's first conversational AI companion for those on the breast cancer journey. With Dense Breast Canada and award-winning photographer Hilary Gold, I hope I said that right, yep. Ellyn also co-produced I Want You to Know, a celebrated photo essay showing the diverse faces and stories of 31 individuals on the breast cancer journey. Ellyn's story and AskEllyn.ai have been featured in People magazine, that's big time stuff, Chatelaine magazine, The Globe and Mail, CTV National News, and Your Morning and Fast Company. Hi, Ellyn.
Hi, E.P.
Oh my goodness, I love it.
All within 2 years.
Yes, amazing. And you are just high on coming back from your journey, from your vacation from Italy, which
it was you know, I'm doing all the bucket list things, right? So
I love it.
Yeah.
I am so glad that we are finally able to connect.
Yeah, me too.
And I've got to say, I don't want my husband to hear this, but he will. You finally made me appreciate his love of all things tech. And I'll tell you why. So I was trying to get us to read your book, and I went on my iPhone and I looked and I found it.
Yeah.
But then I could only get a sample of it on iPhone for whatever reason.
Oh, okay.
And it had to be through Kindle. So I downloaded Kindle, I couldn't get it. So it gave me a sample up to a certain point. And it was about 10 at night. I'm like, I read through the sample. I'm like, I need to finish this book. So I'm downloading stuff. I can't get it. And I finally said to him, oh, shoot, I think if I had a Kindle, I'd be able to read it. Do you have a Kindle? And guess what?
He does.
He had a Kindle.
Yay!
So I got your book and I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad he's a tech junkie. So I got it and I read it all.
Oh, it's not a hard read.
You know when you get a book and you're like, I can't put it down. I read it, I fell asleep to it, and then in the morning I read it again. Yeah, so it was, it was good. So
thank you. That's high praise. You know, when it comes from a clinician, that's amazing to hear. I mean, I certainly hear from women that have read it. I had one woman. It kind of always, these sort of comments really touched my heart. And I had one woman reach out. She'd been gifted the book, and she was going through chemotherapy, and she just said, oh my God, it felt like you were sitting right there with me. And that's kind of why, that's the spirit I wanted somebody that reading it, just like, I hate the words, you got this. I find it puts a lot of pressure on people. So I always say, I'm here to hold your hand. And that's how I want people to feel like after reading this, like it's a warm hug, like, okay, we'll get through this together, you know?
Yeah, no, it was good. And I have more to say about that, but it just like that, it was easy to follow and it made sense. And I actually highlighted some portions.
Okay.
You said on page 96 that perhaps breast cancer was always this rampant and I was just likely ignorant, but holy hell, it feels like the disease is out of control. Do you remember that part? I kind of want you to tell me a little bit about that.
You know, it really, I guess, and this is the part of the problem I think that we deal with women in society is we just think it's never going to happen to us. And we are sort of, I think that there's a false myth and that, you know, we sort of get attached to this idea that you have to have some kind of family history. And it's, as we all know, you know, once you're into this, family history only plays a part in, less than 10% of the cases. And that was such a shocker to me. And, I had friends that were diagnosed, but it just, again, it was kind of over here. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I first got diagnosed, I started actually making a list of women I know who were diagnosed. I mean, the list is much longer now, but even before, I had like 15, 20 women that I knew that all had breast cancer. And I mean, it is going to affect 1 in 8 of us.
Right.
And it's also occurring younger and younger. And so I don't know what we can do. I mean, we've had lots of conversations about this, about how do we raise the alarm bells with those women who are like, it's never going to happen to me, you know? And
Yeah,
get them
you
out there and get them like getting more body aware, more self aware. If screening is available to them, getting their screening done, blasting through some of the myths that exist around screening. Like I was good. I always did. I was a good girl. I did go for my mammograms, but I actually tell the story in the book of, I announced to the world that I had breast cancer and nobody could believe it because I was like the healthy girl. And I had about 20 women kind of raise their hand and say that they would go for mammograms for me. And
mm-hmm.
two of those women came back with breast cancer, early
Yeah, I noted
diagnosis.
that in your book.
Yeah.
You said everything that I keep thinking about on a daily basis. That's why I
Yeah.
did the campaign hashtag Screen40. We're seeing it so much. I
Yeah.
remember when I started practicing like 20 years ago, I feel like what happened? Like it's just it's we're out of control now. What's going
I
on?
know. I know. I was just, I mean, is it that people are going and getting screened and they weren't before? Or is it, I wish we could get to the root cause of why we're seeing this incidence of it rise. And I mean, I don't know that there's all kinds of theories that it's, alcohol, it's environmental, it's in utero exposure, it's who knows, but the reality is it's showing up, you know,
More and
it
more.
feels like every day it's like somebody, and I mean, I get them because they all come to me when they're first diagnosed, and I'm
Right.
just like, oh crap, another one. I have a group here in Waterloo region's not a big place, right? Like it's
Yeah.
about 300,000 people. I set up a
Okay.
group, a Facebook group, just sort of almost like a little social club for women who happen to be diagnosed with breast cancer. I have 130
Hmm.
members in a year.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think people, like you said, they're really surprised when, oftentimes people are diagnosed, but I don't have any history. It's not in my
yeah,
family.
yeah.
80 to 85% of women don't have a family history. That's a crazy number,
No, and the
right?
the irony of it was I got a notification. This is before I got diagnosed, and I got a notification in the mail, and it was from Sunnybrook Hospital, and they were running a research study, and they were looking for women who would participate and submit sort of genetic samples, and
Mm-hmm.
the condition was that you didn't have breast cancer. And I had, had a clean mammogram in 2019. So I'm like, oh, sure, I'll take one for the team. I'll spit in the
Yeah.
tube. And I sent back my sample, and they came back for the follow up study. And at that point, I'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. And they were bugging me. They were like, can you fill out your survey? And I'm like, I'm a little triggered right now. And then it came back
Yeah.
and they were like, oh, your risk profile was actually like normal. You weren't considered to be high risk. Meanwhile, here I am with 3 tumors in my left breast, one of which was 4.5 centimeters
Crazy.
after surgery. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's insane. And the other thing you touched on is what's causing it. I always think like, as years go on, we're farther and farther from perfection, but is it the food? Is it alcohol? I have seen, and I know you're really big into health and exercise, but I've seen, Iron Man, Iron Women athletes,
Oh,
people like vegans, health nuts that have been
yep,
diagnosed with breast cancer.
yep,
So what is
yep,
it? I don't know,
yep.
but what I did like about your book was that whole, be healthy at least. It's not a guarantee, but it puts you in the right trajectory.
Yeah, and it's certainly I attribute 10,000% attribute the fact that I was healthy even with this diagnosis. It made it a lot easier to get through surgery, to get through the treatments. I mean, it used to be kind of a bit of a running joke because I go in to see my oncologist and I'd be in the middle of chemotherapy, and she and the nurse, when you could hear the nurse would come in first and ask you a bunch of questions, and I had no real major side effects other than losing my hair.
Mm-hmm.
And then the nurse would go out and she'd have a little conversation. I could hear her on the other side of the door with the doctor, and they're like, ah, okay. I mean, I'd be like, "Oh, I
Get
was out
behind the
walking
door
5K or
conversation.
6K," and she'd be like, "What are you, you freak of nature?" But I
Oh,
think it
that's
was
good.
because I was healthy. So
Absolutely, yeah, it definitely helps, right?
yeah.
Um, you also mentioned, which is something that I thought was pretty key. You mentioned that it comes with a lifetime membership,
Oh yeah.
which is difficult to really appreciate or understand if you have not gone through it. So, could you
Yeah.
expand a little bit more on this?
Yeah, the line I use now is, and well, I can't claim credit for it, but I use it all the time now. Is a cancer diagnosis etches on your soul.
Mm,
It changes not just how you look physically, but it changes your emotional, your mental, your spiritual. Everything about you, the world completely and utterly changes after you've had a cancer diagnosis, and it's analogous to grief. They talk about, grief is very profound at the beginning, and then the
hmm
waves of grief, they kind of crash on your shore, and then they get gentler and gentler over time. And it's a bit that way, I think, with a cancer diagnosis. As you go further out from your diagnosis, the waves, you don't, it's not front and center. You're not like fretting and worrying every day. But the reality is, there is no cancer free. There is no cure.
hmm
It's just you're lucky enough not to have a reoccurrence, and so no evidence of disease is the terminology doctors use, and so you kind of
hmm
just wait for the next shoe to drop. And so every time you go for a scan, every time you go back for another meeting, every time you get a little lump or bump or an ache, you're like, and it's just, I heard today from one group that I belong to, the young woman who, 2 years ago or a year ago was saying, I'm free, I'm free of disease, and she just died.
mm,
And so you
oh,
just, that's the reality of the world we live in these days. So
yeah,
you kind of go,
yeah.
it could happen to me, it could happen to you.
Yeah, and you always live with that kind of, when I know when women come for their checks at our clinic, sometimes a tech will come in and just say, just show me a case, right? And like, we don't need to show to you for anything other than that the lady just kind of wants to know right away, is
Yeah.
she okay versus not? Because then they don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it over, you know, we report it right away, but it may take a week or two for them to get the results, right? So
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm gonna read it right now and you can tell them it's good.
Yeah, and
You know?
that's so important, and I thank you for doing that, because that period of time between getting a scan and getting your results. And there's nothing worse. In fact, I think CBC is doing a story on this about, I mean, with the tools available now, the patient portals, Pocket Health, the results actually come in faster than you can get to the doctor, right?
Oh yes.
And it's, while it's empowering to have that imaging available to you, it's also freaking scary because you're looking at stuff and you're going down the rabbit holes. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I always kind of resisted in my scans. I kind of resisted that urge to take a look.
Yeah, like you said, it's a good thing and a bad thing. I don't know about Ontario, but I know that in Alberta here, for example, you can look right away. And
Yeah,
the way we've done it is if it's a BIRADS 5,
yeah,
it's going to say in the report
yeah,
BIRADS 5, and there's a blurb that says even if it comes back normal, we're going to ask for it to be taken out. And do you know how many women that come in and they've not spoken to their family doctors and they still say to us, "Well, I looked at my report, so what does this mean?"
yeah,
And
yeah. Well, there's a lot of terminology, right? Like, I mean, it's
yeah,
it's it, it's your world, so you're very familiar with it. But when you're sort of thrust into this, and you're, basically hearing white noise because you've just been freaked right out because you've been told you had
yeah,
cancer, and then they're throwing around all this terminology. Like, I had to, like, BIRADS. What the hell is BIRADS? I always say
exactly.
breast cancer has more terminology than Starbucks. I'm like, and
Oh,
I've never really mastered Starbucks either. I'm like,
I'm working on that as well too. The skinny latte, foam, no
yeah, I'm
foam.
like, a
It's
tea, please.
Yes, but you know what? Going back to your book, that's why one of the reasons why I really loved it. I thought it was so easy and like you broke it down. And I'm like, is it me? Because I mean, I'm a physician, I live in this world, but I don't think so. I think it was super easy to understand. Like even if you have no medical background, you broke it down in such a super easy way. So I really hope that, whether you are or not on the cancer journey, there's somebody in your life
Yeah.
that's gone through this, and
Yeah. It
this is
makes me
so
really
helpful.
happy when I hear people are passing the book on to their husbands. And I actually
Yes.
think I wrote, not that he's actually read it. He said I lived it. I didn't need to read it, but I wrote that book for my husband because he was more traumatized than I was going through this. He still is. And to be able to read it, like that's the thing is like, so much when you're diagnosed, people are afraid of you, right? They're afraid of
Mm-hmm.
cancer, so they then sort of attach it and they become afraid of you, and they don't know what to say and they don't know how to say
Mm-hmm.
the right thing, and they will say the wrong thing usually, and
Mm-hmm.
it's even worse if that person's prognosis is not as good. Then they become
Mm-hmm.
like poison, like nobody wants to talk to you because you're stage 4. And so I wrote this book, not just for the person that's going through it, but for those family members so that they can kind of get into the head of that person and what they're going through at this time. Because I mean, I think even today, if you ask my husband or my daughter, they would just like to say, "Well, mom, it's done. Like, just put it in a box. Like it's the flu. It's done. Put it up on the shelf somewhere. Stop talking about it." But I can't. I can't.
Yeah, it's not. You know, funny you say that because one of the things I wrote down, I said I loved how candid you were talking about your family, especially your husband. It
Mhm.
was very honest. It was very real,
Yeah.
and it's just good if you have a spouse or partner going through it. Like I just, it was real and raw.
And I even carefully edited. There was even, it probably could have
Mm-hmm.
gotten rawer, but I didn't want to hurt him. It was so
Mm-hmm.
hard. Like he's not a, he comes from a family where nothing like this is talked about, and he doesn't like to confront things. He doesn't like change,
Mm-hmm.
and so much change came at us. And I had to really,
And
I'm
you
just,
gave him a topless photo shoot, really, Ellyn?
oh, I seriously almost got divorced over that one. I really like, he,
I
yeah.
was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, but I had to do it. That
No.
was for me. But yeah, no, he was not a happy camper.
Yeah. No.
He's getting
I.
better.
I.
Like I'm walking in a fashion show in New York City, and I'll be walking topless. And he's
Okay.
not going, but he is actually cool about me doing it, which is
Good. Okay,
that's
that's
big
good.
progress. So
Yeah. No. It kind of made me think about my husband in some ways. I could kind of relate, and I was like, good for you. Like, it must have been so, like in the moment, it was so empowering for you to do it, but he needed a minute to catch up,
more
right?
than a minute,
More than a minute,
2
yeah,
years.
but he's getting there, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
I love that aspect of it. So I don't want to give away too much of the book because I want people to actually go there and enjoy it and experience these things like kind of the first time, like how I was
yeah.
too.
But
So I'm not
it is like the cool thing is like the book is not sad. Like it's just
no.
it's honest, but it's actually, I hope people kind of laugh. And actually, if they know
Oh
my
yeah.
husband, some of the stuff in it is kind of laugh out loud.
When you both passed out or whatever happened there, that I
Oh
just started laughing. Like I cracked up laughing.
yeah.
And then when you met that, is it? I think it was your oncologist. I want to be introduced as doctor.
Oh,
That
oh
was
yeah.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
had
was
to
very
blame my
funny.
surgeon because he was so like, we were on first name basis, which I loved. But yeah, my oncologist was a little more stuffy about it. So
Yeah, not everybody's
she was a
like that,
little
but I,
prim. She was a little
yeah,
prim. Yeah.
that was really funny. And I also learned something else, which I didn't know. You mentioned about the data from studying 1.3 million women over 12 years in Ontario,
Yep.
how much better women were in terms of lower complication rates
Yeah.
working on women. Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's an amazing book out that I think you would absolutely adore reading. It's by a fellow clinician. She's her name is Dr. Elizabeth Coman,
Hmm. I
and
write that down.
I think every woman should read it. So she's a Harvard educated physician. She's a breast oncologist. She's also a medical historian.
Okay.
And she was working at Sloan Kettering. I think she's just recently moved to another hospital, but it's called All in Her Head. And she talks about how medicine has been taught and informed by male opinion for years, and the consequences as a result on women's health.
Hmm.
And she goes through Grey's Anatomy, and she takes and breaks it down based on Grey's Anatomy, which also
Hmm.
was based on a man. Um,
Hmm.
and so it's a fast, you'll be angry in about a minute and a half starting to read this, but it is a fascinating book. So There you go. I'll give
I'll
Liz
definitely
props
look
as well.
into it. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
I've been practicing for over 20 years, and it's been, I mean, medicine is in a lot of ways still male dominated,
Yeah,
that
very. Yeah.
mindset. And
Well,
I can't tell you how many times, I walk in and you can almost physically see this. It's a woman.
yeah,
People are happy that,
yeah,
it's a woman coming in. And even, like I say to my technologists, even though we are women, when I come into a room, I want to make sure the patient's covered.
yeah,
Because yeah, even though we're women, I'm still meeting you for the first time,
yeah,
and I don't want to meet you with exposed, right? And
yeah.
it's just those little sensitivities that you think don't matter. And that was one thing I wanted to talk to you about. I don't know how many male versus female physicians you
Yeah, it
work
was
with.
about 50-50 in my care team. So my surgeon was male,
Mhm.
my RO was male, my MO was a female, and my radiologist at the time of like the woman who performed my biopsies, she was a female. So yeah, it was about 50-50 in my
Okay.
case.
Okay. So for
So
those that don't know, RO is radiation oncologist, MO
yes,
medical
yeah,
oncologist.
yeah. Sorry, I'm into the lingo now. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
know. Yeah, so I mean, and I must say I do have I have a very super well respected surgeon. He's a man.
Hmm.
If I, great men out there that are doing the work, very
Hmm.
empathetic.
I really think I pulled the lucky card with
Mm-hmm.
Dan, my surgeon. He was amazing. But now he's married to a plastic surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
and and she does breast mammal reconstruction. So I knew that he was very familiar, but he did the most incredible job on my chest. And it's kind of funny story. I had an actress actually from New York reach out to me on my Instagram, and she was going to go flat, and she
Mm-hmm.
was trying to decide between a couple of surgeons. As they do in the US, they have more ability to shop things around.
Yeah.
And she said to her, I said, does the surgeon have photos that they can share with you of the work that they've done? She said, they don't do that. So I said, I'm going to send you my photos. This is
Mm-hmm.
where the photo shoot comes in handy. And I'm like, here, use them with your surgeon and say, this is what I want. And she wrote me back and she said, that's kind of funny because the surgeon at Sloan Kettering sent her my photos
Oh, look at that.
as a reference point of what they could do. So there you go. So it gets around. So I made sure to tell Dan, and I wrote his office and I said, oh, FYI, you're kind of famous down
Oh,
at
your
Sloan
work is
Kettering.
out there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Like
But yeah, he
that's
was he was fantastic. I actually nominated him for an award and he won. So
oh nice.
yeah. Yeah, he
It's
was
nice
great.
when you have doctors that are human.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds crazy, but there's, you know what I mean. Like
Oh,
it's so rare in
yeah,
sadly in our
it's
profession.
it's there's this natural power imbalance, anyways that exists. And so if there's an opportunity, he completely just he it was the perfect approach for me. I think he was really grateful to me as well because I did my homework. I read Dr. Susan Love's breast book cover to cover and I came in with the
Yes.
right questions and I was participative in my care. I kind of naturally understood this sort of collaborative approach, but shared decision making, I actually wrote a blog on this, is something that I think is understood in the clinical world. And it's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to give you these options and we're going to have shared decision making. But I don't know that the patients have caught up. The patients don't know what that looks like. And so if you get a patient that is an older woman
Mm-hmm.
and they've been raised that the doctor is God, and or a cultural background where you just do not question authority, it's a very weird place for patients to be. And so there's sort of no primer on this is how the game's going to be played. And it's just there's sort of an assumption I think made that patients understand what that means, but I don't think most
Yeah.
do.
Well. Yeah. You brought it up. This shared decision making. So let's talk about the new Canadian screening guidelines that are in
Oh
draft
yeah,
form now. You
yeah,
mentioned something that's really key, that cultural aspect.
yes,
For me as looking the way I do as a Black woman, I think to people that come new to this country, um, not there's a language barrier.
yeah,
Most people that come from Africa, at least I'm Nigerian, Queen's English, that's what we grew up with, but the
yeah,
accent is different.
yeah,
Okay. So it's
yeah,
hard to understand. And like you said, we're raised to not question,
yeah,
right? So to think that you're gonna go. to your doctor and have this shared decision making. No, it's not going to happen.
Right. I even see it as a startup advisor, like outside of the medical world. You know, we have founders that come from different cultural backgrounds and they just sort of treat you because they sort of see you as their teacher. And so they just don't question it. Yeah, this was an eye opening thing. And it was related to the photo series that I did last year because we really tried to touch on the diverse patient population. But yeah, there's language issues if you're a newcomer to Canada. There's language issues. There's definitely this sort of cultural upbringing that you respect authority and you never question a doctor and you just do what you're
Yes.
supposed to do. But there's also this notion that breast cancer is still very much a shameful diagnosis in many
Yes.
cultures. So if you're from Kazakhstan or Nigeria or Southeast Asia, China, it's just there are cultures where women can't even talk with their family members. I even see it with my own, even friends who are Caucasian. I have a friend whose husband is British and she was diagnosed with breast cancer and they just didn't talk about it because, right, it was just like, no, we're just going to kind of quietly put that away. And there's still a lot of people that are like, no, 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 this is a very private thing, which is why I'm sort of loud and proud about it because somebody's got to do it.
So that's why I wish that, especially for that 40 to 49 age group, even though they talk about shared decision making, I wish, especially because of the higher mortality in Black women,
Yeah.
that it's offered,
Yeah.
because believe it or not, even though it's offered, there's still going to be people that are going to say no. And that's okay. That's their right.
I
But
follow a doctor.
it's,
I think she's from Kenya, and she's great. But she talks about she had one woman who came into her clinic, and she said something about going for screening. Well, I'm not going to invite trouble. It's kind of like it's kind of funny because my mother was a nurse, and she was a bit like that too. She's like, well, if I don't know about it, it doesn't exist.
that's just reality. We do see women that come in, and I tell you, there are women that come in with locally advanced cancers in Canada, things that you would see in a third world country.
Mm-hmm,
And these are not uneducated women,
mm-hmm,
right? That have cancers that are fungating out. And it
mm-hmm.
sometimes seems surprising to the text. And I always say, you know what? We don't judge because that denial aspect, the brain, has a way, like if I don't think about it, if then
Yep.
it's not real.
Yep. And I think the other thing, is, and it kind of goes to women that do present with a concern to their GPs, which goes back to the task force guidelines, which, the GPs are following. And they're
Hmm.
told, don't worry about it. It's probably just a cyst. You have to have the next level of courage if you're, a woman that's sitting in front of a doctor and the doctor has now said, you're fine. It's next level courage to kind of press and say, no, I'm
Yeah.
not. I know my body. Like that's hard because you're actually what the doctor is saying to you is what you really want to hear. When you go and you
Yes.
have a concern, you want it to be nothing.
Mhm.
One of the young ladies that I have such admiration for her that we featured in our series last year, and we're actually doing another series with Dance West Canada. It'll be dropping in October called "Not Too Young," and it's
Yeah, I
women
saw
from
that. That looks so good. I can't wait.
yeah. So
Yes.
Robin, who was in our first one and in our second, Robin was diagnosed when she found her lump when she was 23,
Mm.
and she's mixed. Her
That gave
mom,
me chills because of my daughter. I just think, ooh,
yeah. So she found her lump
yeah.
when she was 23, and she didn't really get diagnosed until she was 24. She's now
Mm.
27. But
Okay.
she had, I think it was, I want to say she's triple positive.
Okay.
And, she's dealing with everything, but, it's just like, no, they should be out clubbing at 23,
I
not
know.
worrying about breast cancer. But she had to really push. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that's next level courage because my daughter's 23. I'm not sure she would press in the same way. So,
Yeah.
I have a great deal of admiration for I call her my baby Robin.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that series. That's going to be awesome. So we're going to shift a little bit,
Yeah.
and I want to talk about Ask Ellen
Yeah.
AI. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm now super intrigued with AI.
Yeah.
I'm not the most I'm
Oh,
not the
neither am
most
I.
tech savvy
Neither am
person.
I.
You saw how we started off this whole process, but we got there,
Yeah.
and I was listening and it talked about AI algorithms, and I knew nothing about that, but this is amazing. So if you could tell the listeners how you got started on this and
Yeah.
how it's moving along. I have some
Yeah.
comments about it later, but I just want to let's start with that. How did you get
Yeah.
started on
I
it?
mean, it is very much an accidental journey. So, in my day life, when I'm not, advocating about breast cancer and things, I am a tech advisor. So I work with startups. And it was about a little more than a year ago, I was on a call with another tech company. It was absolutely nothing to do about AI or breast cancer or anything, but it came up in the call that I had had breast cancer. And one of the guys on the call was a very inquisitive guy. His name was Patrick Bellevaux. And he started peppering me with a bunch of questions. At this point, my book hadn't been published. So I, just to shut him down so that the conversation kind of got back to the proper thing that we were supposed to be talking about, I sent him my manuscript. And unbeknownst to me, so at this point, ChatGPT had come out. Pat and his colleagues, they're of the belief, and I am absolutely firmly of this belief, that AI is going to be as transformative as a technology as Google was or the iPhone was. And so it's going to be profound. And they wanted to do something around AI for good. And so I showed up with my book and my story, and I kind of gave them the perfect use case. And so within 3 weeks, they basically digested my book. So the way AI, Ask Ellyn works is, think of it as having all the power of Chat GPT, but then meshed with the knowledge and the lived experience that was imparted in my book. So it's the blending of those two. And so what they were able to do is recreate me in digital form. So if you talk to me and then you go and ask questions of Ask Ellyn, she knows my story. She's also like the most knowledgeable creature ever because she can talk about so many different subjects. And then
Like,
we
how did
built,
they do that? That's
I know, it's
that
insane. It's insane.
it's
Yeah. And they're
insane.
actually, so since that time, we launched her in October. They've now gone off and created their own company called Gambit Technologies. They're actually now starting to build more of these. Stay tuned. They're going to be building a Ask X. I don't think it has a name yet, but
Hmm.
uh, for um, Parkinson's, and they're
Oh,
going to have another one for eating disorders.
oh
And
my
we have, and
goodness.
the one with the eating disorders, the young lady is just in grade 11. And we have another young lady who's just in grade 10 who's going to build one for menstruation because
Neat.
she's part of UN Girl Up. So it's really cool to see. Like, my sort of vision for this is that there's this whole category that's created called conversational care, and that
Mm.
there'll be these AI agents that can exist as sort of a member of the care team. That's like that, just that person with the lived experience is just there to hold, like, their role is to hold your hand. So
Yeah.
we had a bunch of criteria as well when we were building her. She is non-medical,
Yes.
and we killed ourselves to make sure that she never ever will answer a medical question. Like, the guys literally agonized over Ask Ellyn saying, yes, you can take an aspirin, or yes, you can take a
Oh.
Tylenol. And she's completely private and confidential, so we don't gather any data on the back end. So we have no sense, no idea of who is out there talking to her other than numbers. She speaks every language.
So I was gonna tell you about that actually.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of the languages.
Yeah.
And what I love about this is, well, it's free and it's a
Yeah.
safe space. So I went there and I wrote in my native language, Igbo. So there are different
Okay.
tribes in Nigeria, like there's
Yeah.
Yoruba,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Igbo. And and it actually gave, when it came out, I actually recorded myself talking on it, and I was like, it's amazing. Like it was there. And what I wrote, one of the questions I wrote was, I said, I live in Nigeria and I have breast cancer. I want to get married. And I know that no man will touch me if they find out that I have this. I
Oh,
haven't told my family members. What can I do? And people don't think about this because that is the reality of what happens there.
yeah. It happens.
And
It happens outside in Nigeria as well.
oh, for sure. And there's no one for them to turn to.
Yeah.
And there's this, if I tell somebody, who's to say no one's going to use this against me? So the fact that there's no data, it's not
Yeah.
recorded,
Yeah.
you can go on there whenever you want at
Yeah.
any time.
2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
I just love that. And the answer it gave back, I printed it off. It was amazing. It talks about the experience living with breast cancer. It talked about, like, it was empowering as a woman. It doesn't define you. It talked about how being honest in a relationship, it laid out foundation. Man, like, look at this. Like, I don't know if you
I
can
know she's
see
very
it.
chatty. She's very chatty.
Very chatty. I was like, well, hello. Like, she just
Yeah,
kept
it's
going on and on and on and on.
it is a true
Uh,
AI. Like, so it's not database driven. Like, she surprises me with her responses all the time. Like,
yeah, and
because
that's why I was
it
like,
is,
how's she know all this stuff?
yeah, it's
You
just the
know?
magic of what these guys created with the platform is just unbelievable. And then this blending with this lived experience, and it's just such a breath of fresh air when you do talk to her, because you're like, oh, you do get it. Like, you really do get
Yeah.
it. Yeah. I mean, weirdly, I've actually gone to her. I had to have a year ago, I guess it was about a year ago, I had to go for a lung CT,
Hmm.
because they'd saw spots on my lungs in the first round, and
Yes, you mentioned.
the intellectual, like, level-headed Ellyn was like, okay, if there's lung cancer, they're not waiting a year, but you still have to go back and you have these scans, and you're like, oh, crap, what if? And so I actually used Ask Ellyn to talk myself off the ledge, and she said
Mm-hmm.
just the right thing, and that was kind of
Yeah.
very meta that moment. But yeah, there's not many languages. I mean, it really depends. So the languages are coming from OpenAI. If it's a more robust language
Yeah.
like English or French or Italian, she's very, very good. And then they built on top of her this translation ability. This is the team that built her, so that it's a very good, it's not an awkward translation at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if it's like, I don't know, Swedish or some Nigerian dialect, I'm happy to hear that she's performing well,
Mm-hmm.
because those are languages that are a little less universally used, and so she sometimes isn't quite as good with
Yeah.
those. But she even speaks indigenous languages. Like, I've tested her in Cree and in
Mm-hmm.
Inuktitut, and it may be more of a symbolic gesture that I understand you and I can communicate with you. She's not going to obviously get into the medical,
Right.
terminology and things, but yeah, and then they have built her in a way that I can continue to enhance, because my life continues after the book.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go and ask her about chemo curls, she'll tell you all about chemo curls now, where my book ended with me being bald, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so as things come up, I can continue to enhance her knowledge with sort of Ellen approved content. So,
Yeah. Well, like with everything else, it's a work in progress, so you have to build on it, right?
yeah,
It
yeah,
mentioned at the end, it said, last but not least, consult a local therapist to guide you in this process. If you feel comfortable to do so, keep fighting, keep believing, and keep living, because you're so much more than your diagnosis. And I
I
thought,
love that.
yeah, like it was just so good. And I'm going to, I'm on social media, and I know that I have a lot of Nigerian followers, and I want people to know about this, because it's just this
Yeah.
little hidden
That's my
gem.
dream. That's my dream. Like, I'm scratching the surface right now in terms of, the people that I have been able to impact with this and to be able to help. And my dream is that I will help millions. I mean, anywhere in the world. I had a email from a nurse in Tasmania,
Hmm.
and she said, "Oh, I heard about Ask Ellen at our nursing oncology conference." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
See, look at that.
And so now Ask Ellen's going to be incorporated into a patient portal in the
Oh,
Royal
good.
Hobart Hospital in Tasmania. And I'd love to
Ah,
see more of that, but there's just a little bit of reluctance from providers to, share her. I
really?
think people are still a little weirded out by AI, and there's a mistrust around whether she's going to be medical or not. But the clinicians who've experienced her love her. I should mention, we have submitted a grant proposal. I'm working with a researcher at Brock University. She's an oncology nurse, and we've submitted a grant proposal to the Canadian Cancer Society. So fingers crossed. We are
Ooh.
one of 32, and there'll be 16 awards, and we'll know in December whether we're going to be moving forward or not. But it's to do a clinical research study of Ask Ellen in a patient setting, looking
Mm.
at her as a support for fringe patient populations, so LGBTQ and Black,
Mhm.
and then also for caregivers. And so I'm super super stoked about that.
Yeah, I do hope that does well, because we talk about therapy, because you're going through this journey and you need therapy, but it's really a privilege because
Yeah,
it costs money.
Yeah.
and not everybody can access that.
Yeah.
I went through stuff that I needed therapy for, but it's expensive. But
Yeah.
to me, this is so accessible. It's truly a gem,
Yeah.
and I yeah, I all
Thank
power
you.
to you. I really hope that as many people as possible can get can access it, because like how is this free? Like, you need money to keep this
Yeah,
going.
yeah, and
So
that's what I'm at right now, and it's hard. It's not easy. It's like trying to raise money for your startup, trying to get grants or yeah. I'm hopeful. I've got one of the pharmaceuticals is very interested in what we're doing, and looking at deploying her to their patient community, and have indicated that they may fund me. I don't know for how much.
mhm.
Hologic has given me some funding, but it's painfully hard to submit for all these grants and things like that. But whether it's a someone that's been touched, like a family office. I mean, there are organizations out there that build wings of hospitals, and to be able to do
Yeah,
this at scale, and to be able to kind of get behind and support this thing, because our intention is always that it'll be free. And I'm now building out a blog around her as well. And we talked about maybe doing a podcast at some point, but I'm really excited about the idea of building a breast cancer lifestyle brand.
yeah,
And I've
you
got
will.
and with my blog, it's really cool because I've got women who are now stepping forward and saying, I'd like to share my experiences, because
Yeah,
obviously they have experiences that are different from mine. So I've had women write about being diagnosed while they're pregnant, and
sure.
about fertility and about loss. And I'd love to get some more on lymphedema. And so
Hmm.
there's, some different stories that are out there. I've got one woman from Calgary, actually, Natalie. I think you probably know her
Yes,
now.
I know Natalie.
So
Yeah,
she's written a couple of pieces for me now about her stage, because she's stage 4. So it's about her experience and raising
yes.
her children. And so I'm so grateful to people who are stepping forward, because it takes a little bit of the burden off me. I don't have to write all the blog content, right? So
This is such a positive thing.
yeah,
It's going to happen. I have no
yeah,
doubt about it.
yeah,
Okay, so we're getting close to the end. I do have just a few more things. You
yeah.
didn't talk much about this in your book, but about
Okay.
your daughter. Did you have a conversation with her about when to start screening?
I have a daughter and a daughter-in-law,
Right.
and it was interesting because of the experience. My daughter-in-law actually did find a lump in her breast, and my son found a lump in his testicle, and both of
Mm.
them went and got it checked, which
Oh,
was,
good.
yeah, and both were fine. But I was really encouraged, and so I was very conscious as I was going through this, and part of the reason why I'm kind of loud and proud about it is I was very aware that I was modeling behavior for my son, my daughter, and my daughter in law, and that I wanted to demonstrate courage and bravery, that we
Mm-hmm.
can face hard things, we can go and do the hard things. My daughter's still, since the time she was 2 years old, she says, I do myself. That was kind of her line.
Mm-hmm.
So I know she's hearing me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know because she did mention that she was checking her breast. So I'm encouraged by that. And as we progress forward, so she will need to start screening 10 years younger.
That's literally why I asked that, because the
Yeah,
Canadian screening guidelines say start at 50, and you were
right.
about 57 or
I
so,
was
right?
57, so she's going to
Right.
have to
So
start going much earlier.
47,
Yeah.
right.
There
So,
was no family history, and now there is.
right.
I really stress to all of them that they need to be body aware, and
Yes.
that they need to be, because as we know, it is showing up earlier and earlier. And so I want her to be very aware of her body, and in tune with her body, because, you know,
Yeah.
waiting till
And
47 doesn't necessarily work for people. So
exactly. And there are, I mean, pre 40, there's a ton of women that come in that do their self exam and they find lumps,
yeah,
So
yeah,
it does work. You just got to
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
Know your breast. I always say that people, you should know your breast better than your family doctor knows your breast, right? Because breasts
yeah.
belong to you, right?
Yeah,
And
and
they
that's, I
tell
mean,
you
that's how I
every
found
now and
mine.
then.
That's how I found mine. Even my GP didn't really feel the cancer. I had apparently patches of density, but no, I actually
More
do not have
static.
dense breasts.
Interesting.
So
Hmm.
yeah, it was just a shocker.
Yeah.
I have my MRI of my
Hmm.
breast, because they had to map the tumors to see whether they could
Right.
do a large lumpectomy or whether it would be a mastectomy. So I keep them as a souvenir now. Every now and I go back and look at them, I'm like, oh, okay, there they are.
Interesting.
So
What advice do you have for people that are self-employed in terms of how to prepare for, hopefully this is
yeah,
not sensitive, but
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It's such uncharted waters because you know, you don't know how you're going to feel when you're going through treatment. And my husband, again, who's very, very, private, was like, don't tell anyone. Don't tell your clients because you'll lose them. And I
Interesting.
said, no, I need to be fully transparent and tell my clients what I'm going through. And I had clients who were absolutely fantastic. I had one who sent me a gift basket, a you got this, pink socks and
Yeah.
all that kind of thing. And then promptly like took me off, like fired me from the account because they were like, oh, well,
Really?
you can't support us during this and we want to give you space, and I'm like, so it's a kind of message with whether it's an employer or a client. It's like, don't make assumptions about our abilities, like, I continued to work. I would have maybe, a couple of days where I'd be going through, and maybe I was a beast. I was a freak of nature, but I'd have a couple of days where I'd be fatigued and I would, you know, kick it on the couch about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But for the most part, I never missed a deadline. I have a funny story. Actually, I had a new client at the time and I loved them and I didn't want to disappoint them. And they were a bunch of guys and I didn't want them to like get freaked out.
Hmm.
So I lost my hair and I had 5 wigs, and they all had names. So
Yeah.
I was so I was like, okay, I'm gonna wear. It was the one. It was like a little bob. It was I called her
Yeah.
Agent 99, and
That's Agent 99. I know that.
yeah. So anyway, so I show up with
Yeah.
Agent 99. I'm like, they're a bunch of guys. They're not going to notice. The first thing out of their mouths is, "You got a new haircut." I'm like, oh no. And so then after
Really?
that, I'm like, I have to remember to wear Agent 99 for every call because I can't show up with pink hair one day and then bob the
Why
next, and
ever not?
right. And then at the end, when I was done chemo and radiation, I actually, said to the general manager of the company, I'm like, just, FYI, I was going through cancer treatment and I, just want you to know everything's okay now. He's like, oh, we knew. We saw you in people.
Oh,
So they
oh,
didn't say
that's
anything. I didn't say
funny.
anything, but yeah. So
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That does surprise me that people would do that, you know,
it's
which,
people get very weird around cancer, very
mm,
weird. Like one in two of us is going to get cancer in our lifetime, you know?
yeah.
And
Well, that's
so, how are you going to feel when it's you? That people are going
exactly
to get
right.
very strange about it. Or they love to tell you really sad stories like, oh, my
Mm,
aunt had it and she died. And it's like, oh, that's just what I want to hear right now. Thank you.
yeah. Well,
So,
that's kind of going to my next question, you what action or behavior would you say you like dislike the most from people that don't have cancer or breast cancer and they try to that they say or do?
yeah. So, I often, people will come to me and they'll say, what do I say? And I'll say nothing. Just go sit with them. Sit with them, hold their hand, give them a hug, make them a cup of
Hmm.
tea, because the weird thing is your emotions are all over the place and
Hmm.
you never know from day to day exactly.
Yeah.
My husband, God bless him, he kept trying to make it right. I think men do, right? They want to fix
They
things,
fix. Yeah.
right? And he
Yeah.
kept saying, you're gonna be fine. Like this is nothing. And I'm like, this is not nothing. And finally I had to say, just stop talking, just stop, stop. You can't make
And I
this
think
right.
it's a good thing too for us, if you're going through that, to tell people. Because, yeah, you're right. My husband, he's a fixer. I've told him, sometimes I just want you to listen. I don't want you
Mhm.
to fix anything. Just listen.
Yeah. And I
But I
feel
also
for
have
the
to
guy.
remember if I want him to fix something, I have to tell him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel really bad for the guys because, um, when you're diagnosed, you do find your people, and women, I think, seek out others, and we will get that support network. Where the guys go through this on their own, and
Yeah.
I had a good friend who, fortunately, I think it's going to be okay, but she was diagnosed with lung cancer, but it was a very stable form. But her husband, I'm like, is he okay? Because,
Yeah.
and I said, if he needs to talk to another guy, Jim is here. He will help.
Yeah.
And yeah, the guys don't seek it out. So like, there's so many stupid things people say. Like I had the one neighbor, when he bumped into me on the street corner and asked
I
me,
read that.
are you going to make it? I was like,
I could not
well, that's
believe
not
that.
really exactly the most helpful thing to say.
Wow.
But yeah, they'll, refrain from telling sad stories about people who had the same cancer who died, because that's the last thing we want to hear. There's enough pressure on that person anyways. Don't be like,
Yeah.
well, maybe you drank too much, or maybe you should have exercised more,
Oh,
or
gosh.
like it's just all those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
and I don't think you can say it's going to be okay, because I never say that, because I don't know that,
You don't
and
know.
I've had women who've reached out to me who I've spoken with and coached through things, who've then died a year later. So I
Mm,
never say it's going to be okay. I'll say we can get through this together, and I'm here to hold your hand. But
yeah.
I'm very conscious of the fact that it doesn't always work out for people. So,
No. It's tough. I know when I see patients and I do biopsies on them, I've not gone through it, so I always say I can't relate,
yeah, yeah,
because I can't.
yeah,
I can only say I know, like, from experience and going through medicine and even being on the oncology ward, there's so much more than the medical aspect of it
yeah,
when people fight mentally.
yeah,
You ever know, sometimes people just say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm done. I'm tired. And then they go, right?
yeah.
So I believe really in the power of that mental strength and
Yeah,
fight.
I did a webinar back in February with Dr. Ilya Gip from GE Healthcare, who's the chief medical oncologist. Lovely, lovely, lovely gentleman. Loves AskEllyn. Spoke to her in Russian. And the conversation, and I'm actually doing one with Hello AI on something similar, which is really the topic of empathy in care. And I think that's, he asked that question, and I actually responded by saying, I think it is unreasonable to expect your clinician to have empathy. Because to me, empathy by definition is somebody has already that there's that lived experience. Compassion, I had the best of care, and I had the most
Yeah,
compassionate doctors, the most compassionate nurses, and everybody was wonderful. So compassion, 100%, 100%. But empathy, I think that's just unfair.
yeah,
Unless you have a doctor that actually has gone through a breast cancer diagnosis themselves, we all just have this secret handshake, like the emotional roller coaster that you go through. I can have a conversation with somebody with breast cancer, but I can also have a conversation with somebody who's had lung cancer or endometrial cancer, and we just get each other in terms of those emotions. And that's where even your surrounding family,
yeah,
again, unless they've actually had a diagnosis themselves, it's really, really hard to kind of get into
for
that
sure.
headspace, which is what I was trying to do with the book. What I try and do with Ask Ellen is kind of, can she be there to kind of at least give people a glimpse into what's going on inside your head? And that's why I kept the book in the moment. And, I didn't tell it in the past tense. I told it
Right.
right in that moment, so that the emotions were very real and raw.
Well, I think you nailed it. You nailed it.
Thank you.
So, who was Ellen pre-cancer and who are you now? Same,
Oh,
different?
oh, 1,000% different. No, pre-cancer. I mean, there's elements of me that are the same. I'm still, I'm still probably, I take Zoloft because I'm high functioning anxiety, which I didn't really realize until I got diagnosed. And my doctor's like, "Oh yeah, you're type A." I thought I was just type A. I thought I was just type A, but
Really?
apparently I have high functioning anxiety. Um, I'm still tenacious. I've always been an optimistic person, but as I say, I'm changed fundamentally, and it's kind of cool actually. There's this phenomena of what they call post-traumatic growth, which is a psychological phenomena that's been studied since the 1990s. I didn't even realize I was experiencing or manifesting it until I
Mm-hmm.
kind of looked it up. And it's just, I'm more spiritual. I say I love you all the time now. I'm taking the trips to Italy. I'm broke
Yes.
as all get out, because we're in it. And we're like, what the heck, we'll go upgrade, and
Yes.
um,
I love
but I'm
that.
still, like, Ellen is still a fashion victim. Ellen still loves her clothes. Ellen is more self confident. Always been a very, I think, hard on myself kind of person, and I
Mm,
actually am more self loving now. I'm more experimental in the way I dress. I am flat now, so I've got this whole new wardrobe that's available to me, like tank tops and backless dresses and things like that. I'm really grateful, and I'm grateful for the cancer diagnosis, which is, at the time of, I was so devastated. And between the time of diagnosis and my biopsy, I lost 10 pounds
mm.
just from stress.
Oh, wow.
But now I look back on it, and it's brought the most amazing people into my life. I'm hanging out with amazing doctors like yourself. I have these amazing, individuals that I've come to know. They say cancer is like the worst club with the best members. And so I'm actually like really, and it's brought all these new exciting opportunities and a new sense of commitment. And I'm, hopefully with Ask Ellen, if I can realize my dream, I'm going to help millions. I mean, what a legacy, right? Like, what a legacy. And that's, and I'm conscious of I'm conscious of my sell by date now, like I'm not
Mhm.
waiting to do things. My husband will still kind of hesitate if we want to take a trip somewhere. He's like, oh, I can't afford it or whatever. And I'm like, no, no, because I don't know, right? And I'm gonna go.
God, I could talk to you all day, but I was going
Yeah.
to ask you what you're most thankful for, and I think you touched on it
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for
so
being
much.
alive and having the opportunity to breathe and to love and oh, there's a little 2-year-old grandbaby that I'm
Mm.
super grateful for as well as actually
I
is.
hear grandkids are the best.
Oh, skip right over kids and go right to grandkids.
That's
Like it's
that's what everybody says, and I'm like,
yeah.
hmm.
He's a very special little guy. He's
Oh,
absolutely a sweetheart. His birthday's tomorrow, so I'm actually my he was born the night before I finished chemo.
oh,
And so
nice
my last
present.
my last chemo, I was like showing all these pictures of this newborn. So my 2-year finishing chemo date is Monday. And his
Hmm.
birthday is tomorrow, so he'll turn 2.
Yes,
And
that's
then we were
amazing.
actually bald together at
Oh yeah,
right.
I
And
guess
so
you
that
were
older, we'll be able to explain to him that,
bond over that even some more.
yeah, yeah,
Well, you know what? I think I know that knowledge is power, and one of the reasons you said you wrote the book is with the intention of helping others who must travel this road. And I wish we get a choice. We don't. Just that's
nope,
scary, and it's it is what it is. And you mentioned that 17. You said 17 friends went in to get mammals and 2 were diagnosed. So that just kind of solidifies that statistic. 1 in 8 of us,
yeah,
will get
yeah.
it.
It
And
was kind of crazy. Yeah,
yeah, so you talk about saving a life or two, and I think you've done that. And there's so many more lives to save to come. And
yeah.
I'm so thankful that you carved out time to talk to me today. And
Oh, likewise.
I want to tell people to go get this book. It, it is amazing. Okay,
Yeah, and go
and
talk to Ask Ellen. You can literally talk to her about anything. Better. So you can talk to her as a patient. You could talk to her as a clinician. You could actually talk to her in real sciencey terms, and she'll respond to you accordingly.
mhm,
She can talk to a friend. She can talk to a husband who's, and again, private. Like you could scream into the void, right, and say the most horrible
mhm,
things if you need to, but she'll
yeah,
always be dignified in her response. One of the things that's most beautiful to me is the fellow who developed her had a girl who was 4, and his mother was killed in a car accident, and he had to tell his daughter that her grandmother was not coming back, and he wanted to build into Ask Ellen this ability to talk to a child. And
mm,
so if you ask her a question like, why is mommy bald, she gives the most beautiful, loving answers in really simplistic terms, like a mummy explaining to their little
yeah.
child what's going on. And that's the part I just absolutely adore. So
Oh my God, Ellen, you are such a gem. Thank you so much
oh, thank you,
for
Evie.
doing
Thank
this.
you for everything you do, because you are, you know, it's it really does matter what you're doing, and the advocacy work that you're doing, and just normalizing all of this and reaching Black women is so important.
It's
And
important.
you have fun doing it too. Like I
I
love watching
do.
content.
Oh, thank you. I always say like, I don't know, like, I mean, obviously I'm in this line of work, but it doesn't feel like work because
Yeah,
I'm so passionate about it.
yeah,
And it really is a privilege to be in this position.
yeah.
Right. So I don't take it for granted. And for the women that come to me and trust me to take care of them, it's really such an honor.
I
Really,
am
I
a
mean that.
thousand percent convinced that they are in the very best of hands, the most gentle and
Oh,
compassionate doctor there could be. So,
thank you so much. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here, and I look forward to seeing how this turns out. Thanks for being a guest on my podcast, and to everyone that's listened, a huge thank you to you as well. I look forward to sharing the next episode with you. Please follow me on my social media platforms at Dr. Ify Women's Health for upcoming episodes and more. Please note that the discussions and opinions shared in this podcast should not be considered medical advice. If you have any concerns or symptoms, please consult your primary care physician.